They say people don't really hear you until you're quiet. They don't see you until you're gone. Think about it. Every day you show up, you give your time, your love, your energy, and it starts to feel normal to them. Like, it's guaranteed, like you'll always be there. But the truth is, nothing in this life is promised, not even your presence. And that's why your absence will teach them more than your presence ever could. People forget because when you're there, they take it for granted. They assume they can call you tomorrow, lean on you next week, drain your energy next month. But when you step back, when the calls stop ringing, when the chair you always filled is suddenly empty, that's when they start to realize the weight you carried. That's when the little things become big things. You know, that's when silence starts speaking louder than words. Your absence isn't weakness, it's wisdom, it's protection. It's a reminder that you are not infinite energy to be used until you're empty. You are a force, and a force becomes most powerful when people realize what it feels like to live without it. When we talk about value through scarcity, we're really diving into the human tendency to overlook what's constant and close and to suddenly elevate what slips out of reach. The truth is, people rarely recognize the full weight of someone's presence while it's steady and available. They adjust to it like background noise, something they assume will always be there. That's why your presence, no matter how strong, how consistent, or how valuable, can fade into the rhythm of familiarity. People get used to your calls, your advice, your help, your love, your loyalty, and in that routine, they sometimes lose sight of just how much those things are worth. Because when that presence is withdrawn, when the routine breaks, when silence replaces sound, that the absence reshapes their perspective, they start replaying moments, reconsidering words, and feeling an emptiness where your energy once stood. That gap, that space you leave behind, suddenly teaches them something your presence couldn't. Scarcity has always been tied to value. Think about rare stones, limited edition sneakers, or even moments of peace in a busy world. The less available something is, the more people want it, protect it, and assign importance to it. The same psychology applies to human beings. When you're too present, too accessible, too available, the mind starts to treat your energy as common. It doesn't mean people are malicious. It's just human nature to downplay what feels guaranteed. But when you pull back, when you stop being the first to reach out, when you no longer provide that easy access, that's when they start measuring what you really brought to their lives. Your absence forces them to compare life with you versus life without you. And that comparison hits harder than any speech, warning, or complaint you could ever deliver while you were still around. The scarcity effect doesn't just teach others, it teaches you too. Being present all the time makes you believe your value has to be proven through constant doing, constant giving, constant showing up. But when you allow yourself to step back, you see how your silence still speaks, how your absence still influences, how your energy is missed even when you're not actively pouring it out. That shift shows you that your worth is not tied to overextension. The energy misplaces on you ahead of time to make a calamity. It proves that just existing in someone's life, in memory and impact, carries weight even when you're not physically or emotionally available in that moment. And that realization changes how you carry yourself because you learn to set boundaries, to protect your time, and to understand that you don't have to burn yourself out to stay valuable. There's also a deeper layer to scarcity. It reveals who really values you and who only values what you provide. When you're always there, people might confuse appreciation with convenience. They appreciate that you're easy to reach, that you solve problems, that you show up. But that appreciation is often shallow because it's attached to what you do, not who you are. The moment you pull back, the moment you're not as accessible, their reaction shows you the truth. Some people will grow resentful because they never valued you. They valued the access. Others will grow reflective because they realize they've been taking you for granted and want to rebuild the connection with a deeper sense of respect. Absence becomes a filter, separating genuine love from dependency and teaching lessons that words alone could never teach. There's a reason why people often glorify the dead more than the living. It's absence on the highest scale. When someone passes, their presence is permanently gone, and suddenly the weight of what they meant rushes in like a flood. People post tributes, share stories, and hold on to memories because the scarcity of that presence makes it priceless. But you don't have to wait for that kind of permanent absence to see the same principle in action. And even small withdrawals, choosing not to show up at every event, not responding immediately, not overextending yourself, these create pockets of scarcity that raise awareness of your value. People start to see you differently because they now understand that having you around is not automatic, not guaranteed, not endless. This dynamic plays out in relationships, friendships, business, and community. In relationships, constant availability often leads to complacency. A partner might stop appreciating the love, the patience, the support because it's always there. But when space enters, when silence replaces constant communication, suddenly the small things stand out. They remember the way you laughed, the way you showed love, the way you held them down. Scarcity sharpens memory, and memory creates appreciation. In friendships, the same rule applies. A friend who always lends money, always listens, always pulls up, starts to feel invisible in their generosity. But when that friend stops being the safety net, the circle fills the hole, and they start to recognize how much balance that person actually brought. In business, a product or service that's always in stock might not excite the market, but the moment it sells out, demand spikes. Likewise, when your skills or presence are not endlessly available, people start to pay attention to the uniqueness of what you offer. Value through scarcity also builds respect. Respect isn't just about admiration, it's about recognition of limits. If people feel they can call on you anytime, drain your energy, take your effort without consequence, respect slowly erodes because they confuse access with ownership. But once you introduce scarcity, once you show that your time is selective, your energy is sacred, and your presence is not a guarantee, respect begins to take root. People may not like the shift at first, but in the long run, they'll treat your presence with more care. It's the same way someone treats a luxury item. Gentle, careful, appreciative, because they know it's rare and not easily replaced. Another layer of scarcity is how it creates legacy. Presence is powerful, but is often tied to the moment. Absence, on the other hand, forces people to live with memory. They replay your lessons, they recall your influence, they sit with their words in silence, and that memory often becomes more powerful than the real-time interaction ever was. Teachers, leaders, mentors, and even friends who step back often find that their absence makes their impact echo longer. While you're around, people hear you. When you're gone, people feel you. That shift from hearing to feeling is the essence of value through scarcity. Absence also disrupts patterns. People build habits around your availability, and when you withdraw, those habits break. That break forces them to either step up, adapt, or reevaluate. A child who always leans on a parent learns independence when that parent is no longer present for every need. A team that always relies on one leader learns accountability when that leader steps back. A community that expects constant giving begins to create self-sufficiency when the giver stops supplying endlessly. Scarcity transforms dynamics by forcing growth, and that growth often leaves a stronger impact than presence ever could. Energy is one of the most expensive currencies we hold, but it's often the one people protect the least. Money can be regained, time can sometimes be adjusted, but the energy you give out, once it leaves you, doesn't return in the same form. It takes rest, healing, and intentional work to rebuild it. When you're constantly present, always pouring into others, always answering, always showing up, you spread that energy wide and thin, and people begin to assume that your supply is endless. They start to expect it without considering the costs. Energy withdrawal is the act of reclaiming your power, pulling your vibration back into yourself, not as punishment, but as preservation. It's not about spite, it's about balance. When people misuse, drain, or overlook your energy, stepping back is the only way they'll learn what that force truly meant. Your withdrawal doesn't just teach them, it heals you. The thing about energy is that it's invisible yet undeniable. You can't hold it in your hands, but you feel it in every interaction. When you walk into a room, people either feel uplifted or dragged down. When you give advice, it either inspires or gets dismissed. When you love, it either gets reciprocated or drained. But because it's not a material thing, people don't always respect it. They lean on you too heavy, call you too often, depend on you too much because they see your presence is permanent and your energy is limitless. Over time, this creates an imbalance, one where you're emptying yourself for others but rarely getting filled in return. Energy withdrawal is the act of closing that leak. It's the moment you decide you're no longer giving your force away freely to those who mishandle it. Withdrawal is powerful because it shifts the dynamic. When you're always available, people stop listening carefully. They assume they can come back tomorrow, that you'll repeat yourself, that your attention is an endless well. But when you stop answering the phone, when you stop offering your perspective, when you stop rescuing people from their own mistakes, that silence speaks volumes. It forces others to reflect on how much of your energy they've leaned on. They remember how quick you were to show up, how often you solved problems, how much lighter things felt with you around, and suddenly the gap becomes undeniable. People don't learn the value of energy while it's being given. They learn it in the void it leaves behind. There's another side to withdrawal that many people don't realize. It reveals intention. Some people are drawn to your light only because it benefits them. They like the way your energy makes them feel, but they don't consider the toll it takes on you. When you withdraw, those people show their true colors. If they disappear when you stop giving, it means they were never connected to you, only to the energy you provided. But the ones who respect you will adapt. They'll try to pour back into you. They'll ask how you're doing instead of what you can do for them. And they'll value the moments you choose to give rather than expecting it on demand. Withdrawal draws a clear line between the people who are with you and the people who are only with your energy. Energy withdrawal also teaches discipline. It's not easy to pull back, especially when you're used to being the one others depend on. There's a certain pride in being the strong one, the reliable one, the one who always knows what to say or do. But that pride comes with a cost because it conditions you to overextend. Withdrawal forces you to reprogram that habit. It requires saying no when you've been conditioned to say yes. It requires silence when you're tempted to step in. It requires trust that people will figure things out on their own, even if they stumble. This discipline doesn't just protect your energy, it strengthens your boundaries, and boundaries are what keep your spirit from being drained dry. When you withdraw, you also give others the chance to grow. Sometimes your energy becomes a crutch. People lean on it so heavily that they stop developing their own strength. They call you for advice instead of learning to trust themselves. They rely on your presence instead of building their own resilience. Withdrawal removes the safety net and forces them to walk their own path. At first, they might resent it. They might see your absence as abandonment or selfishness. But in time, if they're honest, they'll realize that your withdrawal wasn't about neglect. It was about teaching them to stand without leaning on your constant support. In that way, your absence becomes a gift because it creates independence, reflection, and responsibility in the people who once drained you without thought. Energy withdrawal also changes your perspective on yourself. When you stop giving to everyone, you notice how much you were sacrificing. You notice the fatigue that had become normal. You notice the creativity that was being smothered. You notice the peace that returns when you're not constantly tied to other people's needs. Withdrawal helps you redirect that same energy inward into your goals, your healing, your vision. It reminds you that the same force you gave to others can build your own empire, your own happiness, your own balance. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop bleeding for people who don't know how to stop cutting. There's also a spiritual dimension to energy withdrawal. Energy is sacred. It's the essence of your soul, the vibration you carry, the unseen current that moves through you. When you constantly let others drain it, you dim your own light. And a dim light not only hurts you, it robs the world of your true potential. Withdrawal, then, is not just about protecting yourself, it's about protecting the purpose you were given. By stepping back from those who misuse your force, you keep your flame burning strong for the things and people that deserve it. That flame, when preserved, becomes a beacon, something much larger than what it could ever be if it were constantly drained. Another part of withdrawal is the silence it creates, because silence itself has energy. When you stop giving words, people start remembering what you said in the past. When you stop showing up, people remember the times you did. Silence creates echoes, and those echoes often carry more weight than sound. Your absence then becomes its own language. It speaks of boundaries, of self-respect, of lessons unspoken, and the ones who are truly paying attention will hear it louder than they ever heard your words. The world teaches us to constantly pour out, to always be emotional, always give, but there's wisdom in stillness and restraint in pulling back. Energy withdrawal isn't about turning your back on people. It's about facing yourself. It's about recognizing that your force is too powerful to be scattered carelessly. It's about understanding that you can't save everyone, and you're not meant to. Sometimes the most powerful teaching you can give is not your presence, but your absence, not your voice, but your silence, not your energy, but the withdrawal of it. Distance has a way of reshaping the way people see things, the way they feel, and the way they grow. When you are always near, always accessible, always part of someone's daily life, they don't have much room to reflect. Your presence fills the space so completely that there's no silence left for perspective. But when you step back, when you create distance, it's in that emptiness that growth begins. Distance forces people to look at themselves, to re-examine what you meant, and to measure the gaps you used to fill. It's not the closeness that often teaches the deepest lessons, it's the space in between. Growth and distance begins with awareness. When someone is close to you, they often focus on the surface of your interactions. They get used to your tone, your patterns, your routines. They don't always pause to recognize the deeper influence you bring because it feels automatic, like background rhythm. But when you create distance, those everyday details stop. The calls aren't there, the laughs aren't there, the check-ins aren't there, and suddenly those small details become magnified in memory. People realize how much they were relying on your presence, how much those moments shaped them, and how different life feels without that constant connection. That awareness is the seed of growth because it forces them to ask questions they never asked before. Did I value them enough? Did I give back what they gave me? What part of myself did I neglect because I leaned on them too much? Those questions lead to self-reflection, and self-reflection is the beginning of change. There's also growth in how distance creates space for responsibility. When someone has you close, it's easy for them to hand over their burdens, to expect your support, to let you carry the weight with them. But when you step back, they no longer have that same safety net. They have to carry more of their own load. At first, it might feel heavy, even unfair, but in time, it strengthens them. Just like lifting weights tears the muscle before it rebuilds stronger, carrying responsibility without your constant help forces people to develop resilience they didn't know they had. Growth happens in the struggle, and distance provides the environment where that struggle becomes unavoidable. Without you stepping in at every moment, they discover capacities within themselves that your closeness, ironically, may have kept hidden. Distance also reshapes respect. Closeness, while comforting, can sometimes breed complacency. When someone knows they can reach you at any time, they may not respect your presence in the way they should. They start to see you as permanent, as always there, as part of the furniture in their life. Distance breaks that illusion. When you step away, people realize that your time, your energy, your love, your wisdom are not guarantees. They're privileged. They begin to value your presence more deeply because it's no longer constant. They learn that having access to you is not a right, but something to be treated with care. That respect born in distance is often stronger and more genuine than the shallow appreciation they gave when you were always near. Growth and distance is not just for others, it's for you too. When you step back from constant closeness, you get the chance to see people more clearly. You notice who checks in when you're not around, who respects the space, who tries to bridge the gap with effort rather than resentment. Distance filters out those who were attached only to what you gave them, not to who you are. It sharpens your vision, showing you the true nature of your connections, something you might miss when you're always in the middle of it. That clarity helps you grow too because it teaches you how to move with more wisdom, how to balance giving with protecting, how to invest your presence where it's truly valued. Distance also gives both sides room to evolve individually. When two people are constantly close, they can sometimes stunt each other's growth without realizing it. They lean on each other's strengths instead of developing their own. They settle into routines that keep them comfortable but not expanding. They avoid challenges because the closeness shields them. When distance enters, that shield is removed. Each person is forced to step into their own path, to face things alone, to learn independently. That individual growth makes any future reconnection stronger because now it's not just one side carrying the weight. Both have grown, both have learned, both have gained new depth. Distance in this way is not an ending, but a preparation for a more balanced connection. There's also a psychological truth about absence. It heightens memory. When you're around, people often focus on the moment-to-moment details. They hear your words, but they don't always let them sink in. They experience your presence, but they don't always measure it. When you're gone, the mind replays those moments with a different lens. What you said lingers longer. What you did feels heavier. The energy you gave feels rarer. That memory plants seeds of growth because it shifts from passive experience to active reflection. In your absence, people don't just consume your energy, they contemplate it. And contemplation is what changes the heart. Growth in distance also involves the lessons of silence. When you're not around, silence becomes the teacher. Silence makes people sit with themselves. It forces them to listen to their own voice, to confront their own weaknesses, to realize the places where they were leaning on you instead of developing their own foundation. Silence teaches patience because they can no longer depend on your immediate response. It teaches gratitude because they realize how much lighter silence feels when replaced by your presence. And it teaches humility because they see how much they assumed you'd always be there without recognizing the effort it took for you to show up. The beauty of distance is that it stretches people beyond comfort. Closeness is warm, safe, familiar, but comfort zones rarely produce growth. Distance disrupts that comfort zone, and in the discomfort, lessons emerge. People learn independence, respect, appreciation, self-awareness, and responsibility. They learn not to take for granted what they once had, and they learn to stand on their own 2 feet. But distance teaches patience, discipline, and the wisdom of letting go when necessary. Both sides, though separated, walk away with growth that closeness could never have provided. Donation is one of the most addictive things a person can chase. It's the nod of approval, the applause, the recognition that says, I see you, I value you, I approve of what you're doing. On the surface, it feels harmless, even motivating. Everyone wants to be acknowledged, to know that their presence matters. But when validation becomes the main fuel, it starts to control you instead of inspire you. You start living for the reactions, shaping your moves around what others will say, bending yourself to fit expectations instead of living your truth. The cost of that pursuit is heavy, because in seeking validation, you often sacrifice yourself, your peace, your energy, your authenticity. Self-preservation, on the other hand, is about choosing yourself over the endless hunger for approval. It's about protecting your spirit, even if that means disappointing others. It's about remembering that your worth is not defined by how many hands clap, but by how strong you stand when no one is watching. When people get stuck in the loop of validation, they start giving too much of themselves away. They overextend, they say yes when they should say no, they push past exhaustion just to be seen as reliable, as valuable, as needed. The truth is, much of that energy is wasted because the same people who demand your presence often don't appreciate it fully. The validation you're chasing usually comes in small doses, temporary highs that fade quickly, leaving you searching for the next fix. It becomes a cycle that drains you dry, where your value is determined not by who you are, but by what you give. Self-preservation is the antidote to that cycle. It means stepping back and saying, I don't need to prove myself to anyone. I don't need to run myself into the ground for people to see my worth. I know my value, even in silence. Choosing self-preservation doesn't mean selfishness, it means balance. It means realizing that your energy has limits, your body has limits, your mind has limits, and if you keep trading those limits for external approval, you'll collapse under the weight. People often praise sacrifice, but they rarely acknowledge the toll it takes. They'll cheer you for giving your last ounce, but when you burn out, when you disappear from exhaustion, the same people move on to the next source of energy. Preservation protects you from becoming disposable. It's the act of honoring your boundaries even when it disappoints others. It's knowing that your no is sometimes more powerful than yes, because a no keeps you whole, while a yes, given out of validation seeking, often chips away at your soul. There's a dangerous illusion in chasing validation, the belief that it will eventually lead to fulfillment. You think, if enough people clap, if enough people agree, if enough people recognize me, then I'll feel complete. But validation is endless because human desire is endless. No amount of approval will fill the void if you don't approve of yourself first. Self-preservation breaks that illusion by shifting the focus inward. Instead of asking, do they like me? Do they see me? Do they respect me? You ask, do I like myself right now? Do I feel aligned with my values? Am I respecting my own limits? That internal check-in is the core of preservation. It's about making sure your spirit isn't being chipped away for the sake of appearances. Real preservation also requires courage, because choosing it often means losing validation. People are comfortable when you fit their mold, when you meet their needs, when you bend to their expectations. The moment you withdraw that compliance, the validation fades. Friends may call you distant. Partners may call you selfish. Colleagues may call you difficult. Family may call you ungrateful. That pressure can make you want to return to the validation chase just to keep the peace. But peace that comes at the cost of yourself isn't peace, it's submission. Preservation demands you face that resistance without folding. It means being okay with being misunderstood if that misunderstanding protects your sanity. There's a deep strength in choosing self-preservation over validation, because it means you no longer live at the mercy of others. You're no longer swayed by their approval or their rejection. You start to make decisions that honor your truth instead of decisions that secure applause. That shift changes everything about how you move. You stop going places you don't want to go. Stop entertaining people who drain you. Stop saying words that don't reflect your real thoughts. You free yourself from the prison of performance. And in that freedom, you discover a version of yourself that is not only healthier, but also more impactful, because authenticity resonates louder than any forced attempt at being liked. Preservation also protects your longevity. Constantly giving yourself away for validation burns you out faster than anything else. It keeps you running on empty because you're never resting, never recharging, never holding anything back for yourself. But when you prioritize preservation, you learn to rest without guilt, to recharge without shame, to step away without apology. That rest doesn't make you weaker, it makes you sustainable. It ensures that you can keep showing up in the ways that matter most without collapsing under the weight of everyone else's expectations. There's also a lesson about legacy and preservation. Validation is temporary, tied to the moment, tied to fleeting opinions. What people applaud today, they might criticize tomorrow. But preservation builds legacy because it ensures you're not just reacting to the crowd. You're creating from a place of alignment. When you preserve yourself, the moves you make come from your core, not from outside pressure. Those moves stand the test of time because they're rooted in truth, not in trends. People may not validate you immediately for those choices, but in the long run, they respect and remember the authenticity behind them. Self-preservation over validation is also about teaching others how to treat you. When you constantly sacrifice for approval, you train people to expect your sacrifice. They come to believe that your energy, your time, your love are theirs to command. But when you preserve yourself, when you hold your boundaries, when you refuse to trade your peace for their comfort, you retrain them. You show them that your energy is valuable, that your presence is a privilege, that your love is sacred. They may resist at first, but in time, they either adjust to that truth or they fall away. Either way, you're left with relationships that respect your preservation instead of ones that only thrive on your validation. Seeking. And perhaps the most important part of self-preservation is how it changes your relationship with yourself. When you stop chasing external approval, you start building internal approval. You start recognizing the small wins that no one claps for. You start valuing the quiet progress that no one notices. You start loving yourself not because others love you, but because you know the effort, the discipline, the sacrifice, and the healing you put into your own growth. That self-love is the strongest form of validation because it cannot be taken away. It doesn't fade when people stop clapping. It doesn't disappear when people misunderstand you. It stays with you, grounding you, fueling you, preserving you. Legacy of influence is not about the noise you make while you're present, but the echo you leave when you're not around. It's the unseen mark that lingers in the lives you touch, the decisions people make because of something you once said, the way they carry a piece of you in their actions long after you've stepped out of the picture. Presence is powerful in the moment, but legacy is what stretches beyond time and space. When you are gone, whether it's for a short while or forever, your absence becomes the stage where your influence performs. People remember your words, they recall your energy, they imitate your discipline, and they teach others what you taught them. That ripple effect is the real currency of life because it outlasts you. Influence is often invisible when you're still around. You might speak to someone and think the words went over their head, or you might show up for people who don't seem to notice, or you might hold yourself to a standard that nobody praises. But when you step away, those same people start to feel the weight of what you left behind. They repeat your phrases in conversations with others. They quote your advice when they're facing struggles. They remember how you moved, and they try to apply it to their own path. Your absence forces them to use what they've absorbed from you. And that's when the true measure of your influence is revealed. The legacy is not about how loud you were, but about how deeply you planted seeds that continue to grow after you're no longer watering them. The most powerful influence is not forced but lived. You can tell people what to do, but they rarely change because of instructions alone. What changes them is watching you embody what you preach. Your consistency, your discipline, your integrity, your vision, all of that leaves an imprint far stronger than words. People may not praise it in the moment, but they store it. And when you're absent, they find themselves replaying it. That's why legacy doesn't require constant presence. It requires authenticity. If the way you live is aligned with what you believe, then the life you lead becomes a blueprint others follow, even when you're not around to guide them. Legacy of influence is also about how you make people feel. Long after your physical presence fades, emotions remain. Someone may forget your exact words, but they remember whether you made them feel seen, heard, respected, or inspired. That emotional residue is part of your legacy. Your absence sharpens those feelings because they stand in contrast to the emptiness that follows. If your presence was heavy with love and wisdom, then your absence teaches people to appreciate it and to spread that same energy to others. If your presence was heavy with negativity, then your absence teaches them to break cycles and choose differently. Either way, the influence remains. Sometimes influence grows stronger in absence because people are no longer distracted by your flaws or your humanity. When you're around, people see the whole you, the mistakes, the moods, the imperfections. But when you're gone, memory filters out the noise and amplifies the lessons. They remember the times you encouraged them, the sacrifices you made, the examples you set. This doesn't mean you have to be perfect. It means that the weight of your positive influence will outlast the small moments of imperfection. Absence cleans the mirror and allows people to see the essence of what you gave, stripped of the distractions that presence can sometimes carry. Legacy of influence is not always personal. It can be generational. The choices you make today can ripple into people you'll never meet. A child watches how their parent moves, grows up embodying those habits, and then passes them down to their own children. A leader inspires a group. That group inspires their communities, and the chain continues long after the leader is gone. In this way, your absence is never really absence. It's a continuation of your energy through others. Your name might not always be attached, but the influence remains alive in the way people speak, act, and create. That is the kind of impact that outlasts presence and turns into legacy. There's also an element of choice in what kind of influence you leave behind. Presence is temporary, but legacy is permanent. If your influence is rooted in selfishness, manipulation, or negativity, that too becomes part of your absence. People might learn from you, but they'll learn what not to repeat. If your influence is rooted in authenticity, generosity, discipline, and love, that becomes a compass for others. Your absence becomes a teacher not through pain, but through memory and respect. Every interaction is a seed, and every seed grows into something. What you plant determines what grows in your absence. Influence also stretches into silence. Sometimes your absence is not dramatic, it's quiet, subtle, unnoticed at first, but over time, people fill the gap. They notice that no one else holds the same standard you held. No one else brings the same energy. No one else fills the room the way you did. That realization doesn't come while you're present, because presence can be overlooked. It comes when the silence makes it undeniable. And that silence is where legacy breathes. It's in the contrast between what was and what is now. Legacy of influence is not about size either. You don't have to change the entire world to leave a legacy. Sometimes it's as small as one person making a better choice because of you. Sometimes it's a single phrase you said that someone carries for life. Sometimes it's the way you showed up for someone that inspires them to show up for others. Influence compounds over time. What looks like a small act now can become the spark for something massive later. Your presence plants it, your absence proves it. What makes legacy of influence powerful is that it's often involuntary. You don't always get to choose how people will remember you, but you do get to choose how you live, the life you live, the energy you give, the way you treat people. That all becomes your story once you're not there to tell it. Absence freezes the story in people's memory, and they carry it forward however it touched them. That's why presence alone isn't enough. It's easy to impress people when you're there, but legacy is about what lasts when you're gone. Influence is a kind of immortality. Bodies fade, voices fade, but energy doesn't die. It transfers, it transforms, it continues. Your absence becomes proof that you matter because people keep moving with something you left behind. They repeat your words, they mimic your actions, they live by your lessons. Even if your name fades, your influence remains. And in that way, absence is not an end, but the final test of presence. So understand this, your worth is not in how much you give until you've got nothing left. Your worth is not measured by how loud the applause is while you're standing in the room. Your worth is measured by the silence when you're gone, by the lessons that echo when your voice ain't even speaking, by the way people move differently because of how you once moved. That's the real legacy. Sometimes the most powerful statement you'll ever make is not in your presence, but in your absence. It's the space you leave that forces people to respect what they once overlooked. It's the energy you pull back that reminds them how much they depended on it. It's the distance that makes them grow, the boundaries that teach them, the silence that speaks louder than noise. Don't waste your life chasing validation that fades. Preserve yourself, protect your energy, and know that the influence you carry will outlast any applause. Live so real, so true, so intentional that even when you're not around, your impact is. Because your absence, when chosen with wisdom, will always teach them more than your presence ever could.